not working. I'm Ed Philpott. I'm a trial lawyer from New Hampshire, and I've been telling everyone a recently freed elected official for the Belknap County Board of Commissioners.
Good afternoon. I'm Carl Dermody. I'm a retired consultant with the Jefferson Parish School System in Louisiana. And it's nice to see such fine youths.
My name is Jamie Austin. I'm a sophomore political science student at the University of Maine at Farmington. I'm Farmington student representative to the University of Maine System Board of Trustees and a 2013 alumna of the We People program.
Good afternoon. My name is Vincent Caruso, and along with my teammates Amelia Sacco and David Simon, we'll be answering questions for Unit 4. Also, with preparation from our teacher, Mr. Bader.
Okay, I have to read the question then, which I have to find, which is under my pile of paperwork here. We're going to be reading question 3. Congress is becoming more like a parliamentary system where everyone simply votes with their party and those in charge employ every possible tactic to block the other side. Do you agree or disagree with this statement, and why? What evidence can you offer to support your response? How would you distinguish among deliberating, debating, and bargaining in Congress? Which is preferable and why? What problems can arise when Congress becomes gridlocked or simply fails to act? And how does gridlock shift the balance of power among the 3 branches of government?
As President Lincoln once said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. These days, it seems nearly impossible to read a news story about American government that doesn't mention one party in Congress employing some tactic to block the other side, and accordingly, we agree with the quote in question. Conflicting party interests have not only attempted to block reform for immigration, but also put American workers at risk with recent gridlock on how to fund the Department of Homeland Security. Also, with respect to the Affordable Care Act, House lawmakers voted more than 50 times in the past 4 years to repeal this health care law. Furthermore, after it passed, it has been taken to the courts to use litigation as a tactic of shaping favorable policy and blocking another side. Whether successful or unsuccessful in its influence on votes, a senator's ability to filibuster is a valid means to delay further deliberation and slow progress of an opposition party. Senator Strom Thurmond holds the record for the longest filibuster of 24 hours and 18 minutes against the Civil Rights Act of 1957. Although ultimately the bill passed, this exemplifies how progress of a party can be blocked or stalled.
Article 1 of the Constitution formed Congress to create legislation and take the form of a deliberative body. However, deliberation does not always solely assist in the functioning of Congress due to its reliance on other key factors. Deliberating, debating, and bargaining are all necessary for Congress to function in the way it was created to. Where debating is arguing about a subject in a formal manner, deliberating is a process of thoughtfully weighing options using logic and reason. Lastly, bargaining is more goal-oriented, timed at reaching an agreement between parties as to what each party will do for the other. All 3 processes have a vital role in Congress simply since productivity is difficult without them. However, bargaining is the most preferable, since without it, virtually nothing can be accomplished. This was seen this past December when the House narrowly passed a $1.1 trillion spending bill to avoid a government shutdown. The passing of this bill was seen as a compromise between the Republicans, who recently gained control in Congress, and the disarrayed Democrats subsequent to the midterm elections that would be beneficial for the economy and reinforce some of the president's priorities.
When Congress fails to act, a plethora of complications can arise. In October of 2013, congressional discrepancies and gridlock over the 2014 fiscal federal budget caused a 16-day government shutdown. The shutdown affected U.S. politics by halting the passage of important pieces of legislation, particularly those pertaining to immigration reform, the federal minimum wage, and climate control. The Council of Economic Advisors has estimated that the combination of the shutdown and debt limit brinksmanship prevented the creation of approximately 120 private sector jobs. According to the OMB, about 850 federal employees were furloughed. Such extreme issues in the job market can decrease the circulation of money in both the local and state economies, causing them to suffer. To directly express their disapproval, disgruntled citizens can, through popular sovereignty, retaliate through voting. Faced with these issues, the other two branches may use their own powers to attempt to improve the situation. This recently occurred in late 2014 when President Obama initiated his immigration reform executive order. Congressional stagnation can precipitate various predicaments nationwide, forcing other branches to react through their own means. Thank you very much. We are ready to answer your questions.
I'll begin. You started with Lincoln, not bad. Asked about it and stuff cannot stand. My question is, don't we have ourselves to blame? Haven't we caused this gridlock by electing people who are like-minded and returned them year after year to the Congress?
Yes, I agree with that statement. Our system of elections, of terms where we have to wait until the next term to re-elect them into office, is different than the British system where they have a vote of no confidence. In that system, if they don't approve of their officials' actions, they can take them out of office and replace them with someone who they believe would best represent them.
Although we are almost to blame for our lack of the fundamental principle of popular sovereignty, since the voter turnout has been low in the past years, especially in ages from 18 to 25, it can be blamed on almost by the fact that there has been a lack thereof of the fundamental constitutional principle of classical republicanism, which promotes civic education, which is vital in making informed decisions at the voting booth. So in turn, it is the uninformed citizens creating this gridlock.
And so I know you have the answer. I know you have a solution. So what is the solution? How do we get more people
I believe
educated?
by promoting programs such as We the People or mock trials or having a greater requirement rather than the government and economics requirement as a senior, and perhaps start at a younger age and instilling these values in the youth, it would better them as adults and create habits. So instead of 18 to 24 being the lowest voter turnout age, possibly it could be the highest.
What about President Obama's, he had a trial balloon about mandatory voting?
Mandatory voting, it depends on if the citizen is willing to inform themselves of each candidate and policy that is available to them. There can be a plethora of benefits for mandatory voting or against it. However, as long as the informed voter makes the effort, I believe that is substantial.
An issue with mandatory voting is that it infringes upon everyone's First Amendment right of freedom of speech. With the freedom of speech, you have the ability to either speak or to not speak. So by forcing them to vote, unless there was an instance where there was mandatory voting, but there was a possibility of having none of the above, that would allow that to show.
Thank you.
So you mentioned in your statement that you believe bargaining is the most preferable. Why do you think that? Because it's an interesting thing to think.
Although Congress was formed to take the form of a deliberative body, without compromise, which comes with bargaining, virtually nothing can occur. This is an example of the human trafficking bill that was just recently passed from a 99-0 vote, which was held up for 6 weeks because of problems with that the Democrats and the Republicans felt in Congress with funding the abortions for the victims or expansion on the Hyde Amendment. This was deliberated for 6 weeks and nothing occurred until the compromise was made.
So why do you think in our current Congress, our elected officials are so unwilling to find a 50-50 compromise?
I feel the interest of parties has a lot to do with this. This was warned in George Washington's farewell address, Federalist No. 10, and also in Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. the fear of these factions' interest to overwhelm, or the de Tocqueville's claim of the tyranny of the majority parties.
So then, to follow on what Carl was asking about before, if our current Congress is reflective of voters, isn't it working then the way it's supposed to?
One issue with this is that there is a lack of interest in the majority of the public, who they don't really feel that how necessary it is, or understand that it is an essential privilege that we have to be able to vote and to have people, our elected officials, represent our views and aspirations, both economically, socially, and politically. And if the people don't,
But maybe they're all just good with that.
if that's the case, then that's how it's going to work. But until people do understand that there is, of course, civic education and actually expressing their views politically, then it is going to continue. And as we said before, through civic education and going through ways to increase voter turnout will allow for.
Let me just press that point then. That means it's working though, doesn't it? If it's reflective of the people who are voting to support it?
People that it's because the citizens, because the elected officials are representing the people, but with now how they're only representing people that are voting, it's the majority of the people that are the elderly and above.
Okay, I'm gonna stop there because I know our time is running out. I smiled a little when you mentioned in your speech logic, reason, and Congress. I was thinking, man, that's an oxymoron. Logic, reason, and Congress. You guys have that. Well, are you sure that's not a fast stopwatch?
This has been happening to us all morning long.
Which is a good thing.
It is. It's a great thing.
Okay, I get to begin. I really enjoyed our discussion, as we've been saying this morning. It's discussion, not an interrogation. And it doesn't, all morning, nothing is dragged, that's a credit to you. It's a credit to you and your teacher that you don't skip a beat. You respond to the questions. These questions you haven't heard before, even though you can practice a million times, you never know exactly what's going to be asked. So I admire all the students here, I really do. Mr. Sana, I like your response to my question. You followed up on the question I asked, and I really like the way that you followed on to my question about isn't it, the voters follow. We elect these people, and my colleague followed up on it. Your English teacher should be proud of you with your opening statement. Your word choice was well written and well written. And that's my English minor coming out. The part about the filibuster, I wish we had more time. I wanted to ask a question about that. I liked your historical reference. We haven't had historical reference all day long, which is good. You have to know where things began. So. You mentioned the Federalist Papers, George Washington's farewell address, so you did give us somewhat of a historical background. And the the civic education, of course. We spent a lot of time on civic education. I'm 100% on board.
So that leads into what I was going to say. I loved your mention of classical republicanism, promoting civic virtue, civic education. I was also hoping to ask a question about the lack of civil discourse in our current government and how that has led to a lot of the polarization and a lot of the stagnation. But I also think it was interesting that you mentioned the lack of interest, because I would 110% agree. I know on my college campus, I have friends who are like, oh, I don't need to vote. It doesn't really matter. And I'm like, no, it matters. Please. But at the same time, you want people who know what they're voting for. So that helps. Again, I think the A House Divided was a great way to catch the attention. And I like your mention of strong sermon because I just wrote a paper on it.
I think the point that we're making about you get what you vote for, is what Carl and I were really driving at. And that is, in fact, indeed, if Congress is reflective of the voters, then whether or not you like it, the system is probably working. If that freaks you out, that's a reason why you want to go getting your friends to vote, getting that demographic.
And I did have a brain freeze for a second. The mandatory voting, I was referring to when you said the First Amendment, you have a right not to vote. So,
Right.
so I did have that brain freeze for a second. It was its mandatory voting that I appreciated that you followed up.
Good
Getting
job.
a little older, so.
But you're getting there.
Thank you. Good job. And your English teacher.
I'm their English teacher too.
Great job. Great job. 2 for 2. You said it correctly. It's not the ferry, it's ferry. Well, I'm on the West Bank.
Best Bank.
Good job.
You left the video going?